Next, from Chicago, our contributing correspondent Jeff Berkowitz talks with radio commentator and former GOP candidate for governor Dan Proft. We hear Mr. Proft's thoughts on the need to reduce the cost of pensions and if he thinks the proposed pension cuts go far enough. This runs about 30 minutes.
You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have the master of politics and public policy. He's a master debater. I couldn't, you are a master debater.
Close. I see what you did there.
It's always nice, Bruce does this, he laughs at his own jokes. Look,
Somebody
Dan Proft is with, it's Wolf and Proft. It's interesting it's not Proft and Wolf. We could spend part of the show on that. But it is Wolf and Proft. It's Monday through Friday, every weekday from 9 o'clock a.m. to 11 o'clock a.m. You can find them. They dominate the airwaves. Bruce Wolf, Dan Proft, that's WLS 890 AM radio, the Big 89. And, you know, they take the stuff that we talk about and you make it interesting. And I'm saying that seriously, and you make it funny.
Oh, thank you.
But what we do on this show, we try to get right to the core. So we're just going to start out, we've been talking about pensions. You're the guy who ran for governor. You were a serious candidate in the Republican primary. This was no William F. Buckley type run. And so you would know.
The actual electoral performance was similar.
Here's the thing, and I'm not trying to be funny here, I'm trying to be serious. But at the end of the day, when you look at all the pension stuff, and we'll come back to this, folks, but here's where you end up with this one burning question. You know, our Speaker Mike Madigan and John Tillman, CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute, are those guys strange bedfellows?
No, why? Why would you say that? No, I don't think so. One is serious about pension reform, and that would be John Tillman, and Mike Madigan is not.
Well,
that's a chasm between those two.
You show your bias right from the beginning.
Oh, do I?
Here's a guy who spent 40 years or longer in public life. He's been speaker now for 30 years, Speaker of the Illinois House.
He's ramping up to address
And you say
the
he's
problem.
not serious?
No, he's a serious person, but he's not serious about restructuring state pension funds, state pension systems, because as you point out, if he was serious about them, we didn't amass a $200 billion unfunded liability overnight. So if he was serious about them, you think he may have done something to address the issue decades ago.
But you could say that about Jim Thompson. You could say it about Jim Edgar.
Jim Edgar isn't here.
You could say it about Tom Cross.
You know what's funny?
You could say it, I mean, those folks are Republican. I'm not picking on them.
There is plenty.
So you just instinctively pick on people who are Democrats.
No, I instinctively pick on people who are responsible, and there's plenty of responsibility to go around.
Plenty of irresponsibility to go around. Is that what you meant, or plenty of responsibility?
Plenty of responsibility for the economic morass that is Illinois, in part because of albatross. Let me finish. In part because of albatrosses like the public pension fund systems. But what I would say is, all those names you mentioned, the names have come and gone, and one name is consistent throughout the last 40 years, and it's Mike.
How long was Jim Thompson there? Was he governor for 14 years?
In the last
that's a bit of come and gone.
In the last decade, the public pension payments on an annualized basis have increased by 300%. So we had a problem. We had short funding of pensions. We've had Republicans and Democrats not abide their fiduciary responsibilities, but it has increased exponentially over the last decade when we've had Chicago Democrat control of all three branches of government.
So what was it underfunded in 2002 when the Dems took over complete control?
Look,
just answer the question. If you said it increased exponentially, just give me a number.
I just told you that the payment, which will be $4.5 billion north of that next year, has increased by a factor of 3 over the last decade.
Let me tell you. Which payment are you referring to? The payment that was made in 2013?
The payment the state needs to make for...
That was $5 billion in the last budget, right?
It's just south of that.
5.1 billion. And when you say it's increased threefold, do you mean it was 1.5?
Yes, that's what I mean.
When was it 1.5?
A decade ago. Listen.
But that means they're paying more. That means they're getting more responsible, some would say. How is that damning to the Democrats, and how is that beneficial to the Republicans?
In 1970 or 71, Paul Simon wrote a piece, then Lieutenant Governor Paul Simon, talking about teachers' pension system, TRS, that was underfunded by, I think it was $3 million at the time. Or $3 billion, excuse me. Today, that unfunded liability is $48 billion. the same conversation we have been having for literally 40 years, and no one in the ruling class in Springfield has been serious about either abiding promises they know they can't finance or restructuring a system so they can make promises that taxpayers can finance.
In 1971, I didn't want to interrupt you. In 1971, you said Paul Simon said what?
He was raising the red flag about unfunded liabilities within the teachers' retirement system, within TRS.
And at that point, it was how much?
It was something like, was projected to be the following year something on the order of $3 billion. Today, it's something on the order of $48 billion.
Right, and
so
are there Republicans and Democrats who should share in that blame?
Let me repeat.
That's not the main purpose of this program, but since you raised it, I'm going to go with you, Dan.
Well, yes, I've said
Are
that.
there
So now, if you would like me to repeat it, I'll repeat it. But I have said the political class in Springfield for the last 40 years, that includes Republicans and Democrats, who have made promises they know they couldn't keep, pushed it off onto future generations and future governors and future legislatures because they were looking at their short-term political interests. And so this is why we are where we are. But let's assign some blame for people that are here now and that are continuing to allow this problem to metastasize.
Okay, but let's
and
talk
that
about
is
that.
Chicago Democrats who have controlled all three branches of government for the last decade.
But let me go back to the question I asked. John Tillman has the same position on an important issue called cost shifting, as does Speaker Madigan, called cost shifting, right?
Well, it's called pension
It's taking
pushdown.
the pension liability away from the state at large and pushing it to the school
That's
districts.
not exactly right. But what it is, what the
It's not exactly? Well, what is it, sir?
Are you going to let me answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. So what it is, in terms of the Illinois Policy Institute position, is the principle is you connect the person responsible for negotiating a contract or for incurring liabilities with the responsibility to provide for the liabilities they incur. So what you have, the problem that you have, part of the problem that you have, is you have school districts and school boards that negotiate unconscionable contracts because they figure, well, look, that's the state's liability. So I can be the good guy in my local school district, and then I can push the liability off onto taxpayers at large.
Let's parse that a little bit. I hear that said
And
by people. Have you ever sat on a school board?
No.
Okay, if you had, say, the Winnetka School Board, you would know that when you decide things, you're deciding basically a teacher's contract, the most important thing you do.
This is what we're talking about.
Okay, but let me finish. I'll let you finish a little bit. You're deciding the teacher's contract. You don't sit there and negotiate the pension. You decide essentially what the scale is for how much you're paying people and what rate of increase you'll have over that 4-year period. As I understand it, Dan, and correct me if I'm wrong, the actual pension structure is set by the state legislature.
That's part of the problem.
Okay, let me finish. The structure is set by the state legislature. The boards that are deciding the salaries are deciding how much to pay people. The pension liability will be affected by how much they're paid and the rate of increase. But so will, and the district is paying the main portion of that, is paying those salaries. Okay.
And they're also paying in many cases they're paying the contribution that teachers need to make to the retirement system.
The employee contribution.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's another matter.
Right.
Okay. So folks, so you understand this. We're trying to be informative on this show. We're not trying to just fool around now. We're serious. So you understand this. What's going on here, the broader context, we'll come back to the cost shift in a second. It seems like the Democrats and the Republicans seem to be unanimous. That is, Republicans now for several years have been saying, we need to increase employee contributions for state employee pensions. Depending on the fund, there are 5 of them, but they often say from, say, 9% to 12%. We need to increase the retirement age, which seems to be somewhere in the 50 to 55 range, to more like 62 to 65 or something like that. And most importantly, the Republicans say, I don't know if the Democrats might say this as well, we have to modify the COLA, the cost of living adjustment. Those 3 things, Governor Pat Quinn proposed with not detailed legislation this spring. And others have said, I think fairly, that taking his concept and what they believe he intended, if it had been legislated, there'd be $65 to $70 billion of the underfunding, which is most of the underfunding cured going forward. I don't know whether that would take 10 years or 20 or 30 years. Now, along comes Speaker Mike Madigan, and he says, the point you made. You know, they got this odd thing, and he doesn't understand why the law is that school districts who decide an important element of pensions, namely the salaries, they don't pay that portion. It's paid by the state at large. Okay? The other things are paid by the school district. So all the property taxpayers in Winnetka pay for the salaries that people get in Winnetka from those schools. But when it comes to their pension, that's spread across the state. So Madigan says that, and then, lo and behold, John Tillman, who is a dear friend. This is not really about, it's a cute thing to say they're strange bedfellows because of that expression, politics makes strange bedfellows. But I can say I don't have dear friends because I try to be balanced here. But John Tillman has been on the show numerous times. He has my respect. He has the respect of many people. He's a serious person on public policy. You can agree or disagree with John.
Yes.
But the important thing, here's a case where John Tillman, at least as his policy prescription, seems to agree with Speaker Mike Madigan. They both want to correct what you've pointed out is an inefficient arrangement. People who pay should be the people who are deciding things, right? That's essentially the issue. The school districts are deciding things.
It's not the only issue.
But that's part of the issue. Now, but okay.
Okay.
Well, I don't even know what that meant. It was a cute statement, but we'll get a chance you can elaborate. Okay, so that's the big schematic here. Governor can propose something. Republicans have been talking about it. People have been saying, okay, we need pension reform. It seemed like that was about to happen. And then Madigan raises this thing about the cost shift, and the Republicans say, foul. It's a poison pill, because he knows we can't do it. Because why? Because Republicans are more represented in the suburbs and downstate and less in the city. And this phenomenon we're talking about occurs downstate in the suburbs. It turns out in the city of Chicago, they don't have this pension set up this way. So the Republicans say, they don't say it, but we can't do it. They say because it would hurt the school districts, you'd have to raise property taxes, I don't know, lots of problems. And so that essentially has stopped pension reform from going forward because Madigan basically put that in the bill without going through all the stuff in the weeds. He put that in the bill, and basically if he pushes that and says Democrats are not going to vote for this without that, you don't have enough Democrats to combine with Republicans to pass the legislation. But Tillman supports that idea that this is the time to make that correction now. So implicitly, John Tillman is supporting the poison pill that Speaker Mike Madigan has inserted. Now do you see the point? So people are confused. Why is a serious guy like John Tillman allowing this issue to be used? If he were to say, we should do it sometime, but not now, let's get the pension reform done, wouldn't that be a more sensible position? Now you can take 5 minutes.
No, at least.
At least.
Well, boy, there's a lot there. I would say a couple of things. One is the pension pushdown is part of a comprehensive solution. It is not the total solution. I don't think it's the right thing to do either, the pension pushdown part. I understand John Tillman's argument. I understand the Illinois Policy Institute's argument. It's based on a first principle with which I do agree, which is what I tried to explain before, your soliloquy here on pensions, that the person who negotiates a contract should be responsible for the liabilities they're incurring in their locality, as opposed to supposed to having this kind of concentrated benefits and diffuse costs problem that we have when we do pensions the way we do for the teachers. But the other thing that should be done.
Just interrupt you. Tell me why not now? No, but it's important. You said you favor
well,
that.
Let me
you
finish.
Favor that, but not now. Are you going to cover that point?
Yes,
okay.
I am going to cover that point.
In due course, we'll find out.
Because what you said is, well, what happens is, the school districts, and this is the excuse they use, well, they're hamstrung because the state designs the system. And that's exactly right, except that's part of the problem, too, that needs to be addressed. So what I think should happen, I'm not interested in what Republicans say and Madigan says and John Tillman says. I'm interested in the policy solution. And what I think should happen, at least in part, a framework for a true comprehensive reform is another first principle: the state keeps its promises because people relied on those promises and it's the right thing to do. So what should be done is benefits that have been earned should be paid out to state workers, public sector employees who have earned those benefits. That should be done. And then that removes all the demagoguery you hear from public sector union bosses and their shills in the General Assembly, all the scare tactics and Chicken Little about, oh, they're going to take your pension away, they're going to not pay you what you've earned. No. We should do that. Even bad promises we should keep because people rely on those promises and they directly impact their quality of life. But we should set a date certain by which those benefits stop accruing. And then we should, because we opted out of Social Security, we should have employers, local units of government, as well as state government, set up their own retirement systems that are of a defined contribution variety. Certainly at the state level, local units of government can make their own decisions, at least as generous as Social Security, because that's required by law. And then you have the system being designed at the local level, being negotiated at the local level, and being funded at the local level. That's comprehensive, but it can't be done piecemeal. And you should have a 10, 15, 20-year phase-in.
Have you had a conversation with John Tillman about that?
I have conversations with John all the time.
No, but about this issue, and wouldn't it be sensible to think you two would talk, and John would say, well, you make some good points. I think I'll modify my position.
Yeah.
But he hasn't done that.
No, John, they're focusing on this aspect of it because they're trying to advance this principle, which is a key one, of connecting the fiduciary agent with the contract they negotiate.
No, you said that 10 times. I understand that.
Well, but that's key.
No, but you said, you talked about broader. You say it has to be broader.
That's me. I'm not the Illinois Policy Institute. I'm just an adjunct person.
What does John say to you when you make this argument?
We have agreements and disagreements.
No, but what's his response on that specific issue?
We have agreements and disagreements on a range of policy issues.
We'll try to get John Tillman out.
If you want to have John explain his position and answer that question, then have John on.
But do you understand
John and I are flying largely in formation. We want to get to the same place. We know the place that we need to get to. We may have some marginal differences about how you should get there.
So you're John's
it's not germane.
The question people want to know, Dan, because we're down in the weeds now. You said you want to be down in the weeds. People want to know, well, why isn't reform happening? Why isn't pension reform legislation happening? And I think people would say, well, because the Republicans are afraid the cost shifting would lose them people.
That's not why pension. Look, cost shifting.
Do I get to finish my own sentence? Let me just finish, and then you can respond. It's a little order here.
I'll look forward to speaking again in 5 minutes.
All right. No, in just 1 minute, because people are saying, and I think the pundits are saying this, almost everybody. I think Matt Murphy would say this. There'll be no reform before the election because Madigan doesn't want to do the necessary things that would upset the teachers, not all the unions, teachers unions and other unions, and they're their allies, and they don't want to lose their support before the election. So if they're going to do anything, it's after the election. And Madigan did this because he knew the Republicans wouldn't want the cost shifting for the reasons I've said, and so they won't allow that to be in there, so he knows he's got a poison pill. And so why don't you say, it seemed like the logical thing, because you ran for governor, and you might run for governor again, right?
Anything's possible.
Okay. So you would understand, and you say, if you want pension reform here, you got to make a little deal, and the deal would be, you'll get all the things that we talked about, the change in the COLA, the increase in the employee contribution, the modification of the retirement age, and you Republicans should go along with what Madigan's saying because it's a good policy to change this thing that we've talked about, the cost shift. And Madigan said if you do that, he'll support the rest.
No.
And it gets done.
Absolutely not. Let me tell you something, what I think the cost shift is and what Republicans' messaging on that cost shift should be. What they're doing, they're coming after the last thing that you have. They've squeezed employers and squeezed jobs out of this state. Now they're coming after your home. They're having a fire sale.
After your home? That's a bit of an overstatement, isn't it?
They're having a fire sale with your personal property, your retirement, because frankly, a person's home is largely the centerpiece of their retirement. They are coming after your home to liquidate your home to finance the retirements of their acolytes. So this is more of a sop to the public sector union financiers who finance the Chicago Democrats, who they and then in turn finance when it's campaign season. And Mike Madigan and John Cullerton and the Chicago Democrats are saying, we will liquidate your home, your retirement, to finance the guaranteed benefit levels of public sector workers. That's what they're saying.
Well, when they plot this out, the cost, and they say they do it over 20 years, they make it sound as if the cost is relatively minimal. The imposition on the school districts is relatively minimal. The loss of reserves or decrease in reserves for doing this is minimal. Are you saying all those data, they're lies?
What I'm saying is
I mean, how do you square the data with what you just said?
What I'm saying is that they will make promises they know they can't keep. And they will put your house in the crosshairs to finance those promises, not fully finance them, but just finance them for long enough to get through one more election cycle, to maintain power a little bit longer, because they have to do whatever is required to finance their core constituency, and that's the public sector unions and state dependents. And they will liquidate everything in their wake in order to do that, because it's about political power. It's not about solving these public policy problems. It is not about
calm down.
I'm calm. I'm emphatic. It is not about setting up a system that is responsible and respectful to the taxpayers who are financing everything.
Well, then shouldn't the position be of the Republican Party, far be it for me to say, and I'm not, as you know, I'm fair and balanced, so I'm not a Republican like you.
Of course.
But if I were, I would say the position of the Republican Party, if I wanted to elect, just hypothetically, if I were Chris Redonio and I were Tom Cross, the leaders respectively in the House and Senate of the Republican Party, I would say let's use this election to force the issue on pension reform, and let's get Republicans elected if the Democrats don't go along. And say, I want to tell everybody, pure and simple, this election on November 6th, this is what Cross and Redonio should say, I think, tell me if you agree, this election is about pension reform. It's gobbling up our resources, it's hurting everything else we want to do about education, healthcare, and so forth, and it's pushing taxes up higher. So we've got to do three things. We have to increase employee contributions, we have to modify the COLA, and we have to increase the retirement age. This cost shift that we're talking about, Dan Proft is a smart guy, and he says, this policy should be changed, but it should be changed in the context of a larger set of factors, right? That's what you're saying. Other things should be changed about how the pensions are determined. The whole structure of having the state legislature set that determination is wrong. So Mr. Proft here, who Redonio and Cross I'm sure would agree with, has just pointed out, we'll do that another time, and we'll run on that. And if the Democrats don't want to do this now, and you want pension reform, and you want to clean up Illinois, and you want business to come here in the future, not worried about this pension liability they're going to have, you'll vote for Republicans. You'll vote for lower taxes, you'll vote for lower spending, you'll vote for fairness. Prof said we'll keep our promises, but we're going to still have to change things in the future.
No.
Have I outlined a winning?
No, you haven't. That's not the message at all, because you confuse symptoms for causes. And so the message is...
You'll fight with me about everything.
No, I actually...
If I said your name was Dan Proft, you'd probably...
No, my name is Dan Proft.
You'd probably say it's not.
I just said it was.
All right, okay. But seriously, what's wrong with that message?
Well, I will tell you.
Yeah.
It's what I just said. You confuse a symptom for
We only
a
have
cause.
5 minutes, so you don't want to talk for 6 minutes.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry if I don't want to get a word in edgewise.
Just remember, folks, the one thing I got to interrupt to say.
Of course.
Remember to watch Wolf and Proft every
you.
Monday, Tuesday,
At least I'll
Wednesday,
get a plug
Thursday,
out of
Friday,
this.
9 o'clock a.m. to 11 o'clock a.m. That's WSAM radio, 890 a.m. Seriously, did I say watch? You should listen to it on your radio.
Yes, it's hard to watch the radio. You could watch the radio.
It's an interesting program. It's humorous, and you learn things.
Thank you.
The only criticism I have is that it's incessantly, it's always conservative. I never heard a liberal caller. Can we get that graphic going up there? Has there ever been a liberal who called in to Wolf and Proft?
We have liberal callers all the time.
No, they're like...
Oh, they're not? Okay.
They're
well,
not
I only
there.
do the show every day, so
Maybe you get one,
Yeah,
Anyway,
we've
but
lots.
seriously...
But can I get back to the Republican message?
But you should listen to Proft. Wolf. Bruce Wolf is a funny guy.
Yes, he is.
He's basically carrying the show. No,
He is. He
Dan's
absolutely is.
Anyway, so
The Republican message, in a sentence to me, should be that if you feel like you have been scammed by a state government you finance, then you're a Republican. You may have never voted Republican. You may not affiliate with the Republican Party. But if you have been fleeced by a state government you finance, then at least this year, this cycle, you're an Illinois Republican, and you should vote Republican. Okay. Otherwise, and if you don't, you're essentially saying, I want to continue to be treated like a pigeon by the Chicago Democrats. Because the pension system is just one example of the scams that they're running on the people and businesses in Illinois.
All right, so you're saying my message was too complicated.
No, it's
the wrong message completely.
I'm saying it's
what's wrong with my message?
You confuse a symptom for a cause.
The cause is you have dominant Democratic control. You have to change that, then you can start fixing government. As you said, government isn't broken, it's fixed, but you're fixing it in the right sense, right?
Unfixing it, of sorts.
So your point is that it's the cause. You don't have pension reform happening because you have messed up government. You put Republicans in there.
It's not messed up government. You have a government that has an agenda that is at odds with the economic security interests of the people of this state.
You have to replace it with a different agenda, which means putting Republicans in there as opposed to Democrats. With the right agenda. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's a start. So the first thing you have to do is stop digging. So stop electing the same people that are running the same scams, that are financing their friends and advancing their personal political and pecuniary interests at the expense of your economic security interests. That's the succinct explanation of what's happening.
We've got to do another plug because today's date, it's July 17th. Some of you folks won't see this if you're watching it on TV till after July 31st.
Or want to.
But others may see it on YouTube. And you would know July 31st is what, Dan?
That would be Milton Friedman's birthday?
100th birthday, right?
Yes.
If he were alive today.
Yes.
This is the man who's most affected and generally organized your thought, would you say? Your model.
I would put him and Pope John Paul II.
Okay, seriously, you're not
yes,
fooling around.
I'm not
those
kidding.
Two. And we got a book here, you've already read this, Milton Friedman, Capitalism and Freedom, see if we can get a shot of that. We often give this book to our guests, courtesy of the Heartland Institute, who's made it available to us. But, you know, this is the 50th anniversary, a lot of people don't realize this, of this book, Capitalism and Freedom, published by the University of Chicago Press 50 years ago.
Yes.
The essence of Milton Friedman is that it's the individual, right?
Free minds and free markets.
Okay. So that takes us to the current, because if you've been watching the news in the last few days, there's this big fight. And again, you might be watching it a few weeks later, but you'll know in the middle of July there was this big fight because Barack Obama, our president, said, in a larger context, he said, look, it's not the person per se who starts the business, it's the person who starts the business with the infrastructure, with the government, so forth. But a Nobel Prize-winning economists from Chicago have made, in a sense, the same point. You can't really have an efficient system without a government that sets up a system of property rights. You need government for that type of thing. You need government for national defense. Obama was, in a sense, saying this private free enterprise is part of a larger system. He wasn't really knocking entrepreneurs. He wasn't saying government is more important than entrepreneurs. Part of a model. That's a fair reading, right?
No, it is not a fair reading. That is not at all.
So everything I've said you would agree with, but you don't agree with what Barack Obama said. Would that be fair? What I've just said now, you would generally agree with?
I would disagree with your characterization of what Barack Obama said.
No.
What he essentially said...
No, but Friedman's, what I'm saying, this paradigm of the free market and how it fits in having an institutional private property system, you would agree with that, right?
Yes, I agree with property rights and the free exchange of goods and services between individuals. Mutually beneficial exchange is the basis of a free economy, and you need to have property rights and those property rights enforced. I do agree with that.
And we're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank Dan Proft, who may be running for governor again someday. You don't have to answer that. But give us, is this the paradigm of the election for 2012? Mitt Romney, Barack Obama, free market versus something else?
I think it can be crystallized as a government-centric approach versus an entrepreneur-centric approach.
Mitt Romney is an entrepreneur, free market.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.